Hogwarts Legacy, aka the Wizard game, has been the talk of the gaming world ever since it launched last month. But will Old Faithful be able to run it? Let's find out. Before I go any further, please hit like and consider subscribing. It costs nothing but can make a big difference in helping me to bring out better content more often. Thanks. Any PC gamer that's even just mildly a Harry Potter fan will tell you just how long they've been waiting for a proper Harry Potter type game that places you slam bam in the middle of that wonderful wizarding world. Myself, being slightly more than a mild fan, was extremely excited when Hogwarts Legacy came close to release. But then Portkey Games published what they call Experience Hogwarts Legacy on PC, and the specs had me and many others wondering if the game would even be playable at all. Recommended specs for 1080p 60 FPS on high settings came in at a Ryzen 5 3600, 16GB of RAM, a SSD and a GTX 1080 Ti. Ryzen 5 3600, check. 16GB of RAM, double check. SSD, check. GTX 1080 Ti, not so much. If you want the full rundown of my system specs, go pop a look at this video, link down in the description as well. But to put it into quick and easy to understand terms, my GTX 1060 6GB has got 1280 CUDA cores. A 1080 Ti has got 3584 CUDA cores. That's 2.8 times more than my GPU. Furthermore, a 1080 Ti has got 5GB more VRAM with 2.5 times more memory bandwidth, and is capable of drawing more than double the power of my card. So in essence, a 1080 Ti has got 3 times more performance and almost double the amount of VRAM. So will Hogwarts Legacy set fire to my 1060? Only one way to find out. So you'll see Hogwarts Legacy is running, and no, my system is not on fire. But how well does it run? Before we get into the benchmarks, I found something about the minimum specs required to run the game quite interesting. It says a Spinny Boy hard drive is supported, although a SSD is recommended, but only mentions this if you're looking to play the game at 720p. And I know games like Cyberpunk 2077 and Forza Horizon 5 also recommend using a SSD, but they don't outright exclude a hard drive from the mix. And in my Do You Really Need a RTX 4090 video, all those games were played off of my mechanical hard drive, except for Forza Horizon 5, as that's the only game thus far that has given me performance issues when running it from anything other than a SSD. So does a hard drive suddenly stop working or give such bad gaming performance running Hogwarts Legacy at 1080p that you dare not consider installing it on anything other than a SSD? To answer that question as well, I ran a set of benchmarks while running the game from my Sabre & Rocket Gen 3 M.2 NVMe drive, as well as from my old and heavy SATA 3 hard drive. Not at the same time, of course. So how did I benchmark the game? I had a set route and quest, including some non-official side quests, that I'll be showing a bit later in the video, and also sharing the best settings that I found for my system. I used this as a benchmark at each graphics preset level and ran it once during in-game daytime as well as in-game nighttime, and used the average between the two to get to my final results. If you have played Hogwarts Legacy, you'll know that there are quite some significant differences between day and night in the game that add to the overall realism of the day-night cycle, including NPC, wildlife and monster density, as well as significant differences in lighting, shadows and other similar effects. Let's take a look at how Old Faithful held up. It's no surprise that the low global quality preset delivers the highest FPS, with only a 7% FPS difference in the favor of the game running from an NVMe SSD. Upping the graphics to the medium preset has a significant impact on average FPS, yet still running at a more than playable frame rate, with the SSD netting 5% better performance on average. Further increasing the graphics settings to the high preset gets our average FPS down into the high 30s, with the game running from the SSD showing a mere 3% advantage over the hard drive, which in terms of average frames per second amounts to 1 frame per second. The game does run at the Ultra Graphics preset, and at first seems playable, especially running from the SSD, which showed a 13% average FPS gain over the hard drive and kept the average FPS across the benchmark quite close to 30. But once you enter any area where you are not the only moving pixels on the screen, the game becomes pretty much unplayable and leaves you feeling nauseous and wanting to blow your savings on a GPU with a lot more grunt. Even at ultra settings, the game never used more than 5.5 GB of VRAM, and at the other preset levels averaged around the 5 GB mark, which might lead me to believe that, being a console port, we once again are sitting with a case of bad optimization for PC, and that a 1066 gig would have performed better if Hogwarts Legacy started life out as a PC game, being ported to console instead. On all these tests, the GPU maxed out at a pretty cool 58 degrees Celsius at an ambient temperature of 24 degrees, so I doubt the game will set fire to the card. The biggest advantage that the SSD showed over the conventional hard drive was in terms of loading times. At initial game launch, preparing shaders took 24 seconds running from the SSD, almost a minute faster than running from the hard drive. The first save load took 11 seconds running from the SSD, more than a minute faster than running from the hard drive. Interestingly enough, post first save load, the Spinny Boy kept up quite well, and there was literally no difference in loading time when force waiting the game to change from day to night or night to day, and save loads were significantly faster from the hard drive as well. One thing that I did notice is that the game absolutely loves RAM, and used anything between 17 and 19 GB worth of it, making the recommended 16 GB seem more like a minimum than a recommended requirement. If this is anything to go by, 32 GB might become the new standard for gaming in the near future, although I haven't really seen any other game being this RAM hungry at 1080p, and might just be a further case of bad optimization for PC. Now down to my custom graphics settings. These are the settings that I found gave the best overall gaming experience, while still doing the World of Hogwarts justice in terms of graphics detail and effects quality. Now the game's graphics still holds up pretty well even at the low overall preset, as you can see from this comparison. But you lose out on lighting and fog effects that just add that extra bit of magic to the game. So it's worth the few minutes of tinkering around in the settings tab to get a nice quality to performance balance. Let's take a quick run of a little benchmark I devised at my custom settings, just to give you an idea of what those FPS figures represent, and to show just how playable the game is, even on an old 1060. I tried to include a mix of movements and, let's call them, activities that you might encounter on your trip around Hogwarts, to try and simulate a fair representation of the gaming experience you might have on a similar spec system. We start the benchmark off in the Defense Against the Dark Arts Tower, with the Follow the Butterflies quest selected and being tracked on our minimap. It's currently night time in the wonderful world of Hogwarts, which you'll see adds quite a few lights and other effects to the world that you won't really encounter during the daytime. We make our way down a couple of flights of stairs, just casually following the route marked out on our minimap. As we make our way through this passage, experiencing some of the little details that truly make Hogwarts Hogwarts, as the paintings and armor statues come to life. As we turn left, we encounter our first closed door that I found may or may not give you a brief pause as it loads the majestic outside of the castle. Across this bridge and through the next door, we yet again find a lot of stairs and quickly make our way down to the Great Hall. Pay attention to just how quiet and empty the castle is. Down some stairs, and some more, and through this door we find ourselves in a passage greeted by some pretty nice light rays coming in through the windows as we carry on and pass through the next door, and enter the bell tower, down yet some more stairs, a short turn right, and we exit the castle, where we are greeted by the Quidditch field in the back, surrounded by the mountainous terrain of Hogwarts. A quick run over to the fountain, and we hop onto our trusty broom, ascending over the courtyard walls and hastily making our way to the Forbidden Forest. Of course, no flight is complete without having a peek at the terrain around us as we start descending again. Dismounting our broom at the little bridge leading to the Forbidden Forest. Sprinting over the bridge, you'll see the butterfly icon on the minimap coming closer and the quest starting as we finally reach it.
There they are.
Then it's just a case of following the butterflies and trying to stay out of trouble unless you're really in the mood to battle the great spined dugbog and make the quest harder than it should be. You can either continue on straight, following this path, or make your way down to the river as I did, to throw some water effects in the benchmark as well. Out of the river and up the incline, you're back on the path you started off on, and the butterflies lead you to a location just outside this big ass spider nest. Then it's merely press F to open a chest and you collect an item that changes every time you do this quest. This is the part where I decided to abandon this quest and embark on some non-official side quests. Sometimes I found a not so friendly dark mongrel just beyond this tree, but if not, I just turned around, making my way back to that spider's nest we just came from. Unfortunately, Open Sesame doesn't seem to work here, but a quick burst of Incendio, you're free to enter without any trouble. A few steps forward, and an 8-legged welcoming committee chooses to fight rather than offering you some coffee and cookies.
Not my fault you're a deadly great spot.
After making quick work of them, I run back to the path and follow it deeper into the Forbidden Forest.
The castle must have been quite stately in its time.
After taking a right here, you'll see some magical spirits flying overhead, which were actually the Ashwinder soldiers up ahead. Again, a nice but easy battle, and I made sure to use some ancient magic just to spice up the magic used during the benchmark.
Let's talk of what this is. Incendio.
Then I basically just turned around and had a brief look at the cliffs and trees and ended there. It's a short little benchmark, but I feel it covers quite a wide basis of events that you might encounter or actions you might find yourself doing during the playthrough of the game. As I mentioned before, I did do both a daytime and nighttime run of the benchmark, and I'll just do a quick run through some of the major graphical differences between them for you to understand why I felt the need to take an average between the two to get the results as credible as possible. As you can see coming down the stairs, we have much more light coming in through the windows, something that's apparent throughout the castle, with the lights on the walls now being off. You'll immediately also find a lot more NPCs in the world, especially in large open areas such as the Great Hall and the courtyard we exit into after leaving the castle. The run through the Forbidden Forest is basically just a lit up version of what it was during the night, with some different shadows, reflections, and of course god rays coming from the sun. Of the differences, the increase in NPCs definitely had the biggest impact on performance, when comparing daytime to nighttime benchmarks, and is something to consider when tweaking your graphics settings. You can find my exact graphics settings in your description down below, should you be looking for a good place to start if using a similar spec system. So does Old Faithful run Hogwarts Legacy? Yes it does. Is it playable? Definitely. Will your non-80 or 90 SKU NVIDIA GPU be able to run the game? Well, unless you've got a real potato PC, it should. You might encounter some weird RAM issues if you're running 16 gigabytes or less, but 16 gig should get the job done. Is there room for optimization improvement from a game developer side? Without a doubt. But I don't see them optimizing the game beyond RTX 20 series GPUs. And we probably can't blame them for it either. The resources required to do that probably greatly outweighs any benefit for them as developer. So take some time to tune the game's graphics settings, specifically for your system and personal preferences of course, and you'll be surprised by the performance you actually can get out of this game. That's it for today. Remember to like and subscribe for more mid-range gaming. See you in the next one.